The Chargers offseason has officially started, and though it's a little bit more premature than some of us Chargers fans had hoped for, there's still a lot to be excited about, and that's what I want to talk about in this video, breaking down not only the offense coordinator potential options, as well as free agency and draft and everything else that comes along with the offseason. So if you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. But let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go and get right into things. Now, as mentioned, we're going to be going through a whole bunch of things. But if you want a little bit more in depth on the offense coordinator, I already posted a video kind of celebrating Joe Lombardi's firing and also included some of my top candidates in that video. But nonetheless, I want to talk to you guys right now about everything that's going to be going on in the offseason. And although all this topics from free agency, draft, all this, we'll get a whole lot more videos, a whole lot more in depth. I just want to get you guys a little bit excited about this offseason because there's a lot to look forward to for us Chargers fans. So first, let's touch on the offensive coordinator as always. Now, I did already kind of cover this stuff, and you want a little bit more in depth, feel free to check that out. Some of my top options were Frank Wright, Mike LaFleur, Cliff Kingsbury, and Brian Johnson, who I think I'm kind of leaning into as the quarterback coach for the Eagles. But since that time, there has been a little bit more shifting that's been happening that I want to cover here quickly. For one, the Chargers asked to talk to the offensive coordinator for the Vikings and were turned down, but now have interviewed Jared Johnson, who is the secondary quarterback coach for the Vikings. Now, that might sound a little bit confusing, and maybe you don't want him for offense coordinator. I know that's a massive jump, but potentially he comes in as your quarterback coach after being the assistant for the Vikings, jumps on, takes Shane Day's position, and he has a good amount of experience and actually already coached a little bit with Frank Wright. So maybe that's a little bit of a way to butter it up to get Frank Wright here if he decides not to take a head coaching job. Pretty decent option there. He also had some coaching experience with Kyle Shanahan in 2017, as well as Kevin O'Connell, some pretty good coaches in his coaching tree. So maybe we see a little bit of good coming from that potential hire. But the Chargers also have already talked to, or are attempting to talk to, Zach Robinson, the offense coordinator, or the potential candidate for the offense coordinator for the Chargers. And I do think he's the quarterback coach, and he did a pretty good job at making Matthew Stafford look really, really good last year, not this current year with playoffs still occurring, but last year when they won the Super Bowl. And you already have some experience with him and Brandon Staley working together when Brandon Staley was with the Rams. So two options that have kind of transpired since my latest video, and something that I wanted to cover pretty quickly there. But that's certainly not the most important thing. Next, I want to talk about our free agents. And I'm definitely going to go a little bit more in depth on a separate video who the Chargers should keep, about how much we're looking at price-wise, as well as a different video on who the Chargers should target outside of the team in free agency, who they should target and what they're going to sell for. But let's first look at the Chargers' massive list of free agents that they are going to need to decide if they're keeping or letting go on this team alone. And you're not going to be able to keep all these guys. The list is too big. Not only that, but you're probably going to have to sign Justin Herbert either this offseason or you have to next offseason. But I kind of think they're going to do it this offseason. I really hope they do, because that would be a huge weight off of us Chargers fans' shoulder to make sure Justin Herbert stays on this team, because it would be brutal if he somehow left this team. But let's look at the free agents on this Chargers team, and just the top most important ones, because there is a lot of practice squad team players and all that stuff that also are important, but I just want to talk about the top guys. Kyle Van Noy, who was a huge part of that late season push. I think he had like 5 sacks in 5 straight games. Bryce Callahan, which was an incredible pickup, and I'm a huge fan of. You had Morgan Fox. You have Nas Adderley, who is a questionable candidate. I think he's full safety, because I think Derwin's strong safety. I always mix those two up. And you do have Alohi Gilman, but he's really good in the run, but not so great in coverage. I think Nas fills that gap. Do you try to keep Nas? Do you have other options there? JT Woods, that's a questionable piece there. You also have DeAndre Carter, who was a key piece to this offense with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams going out with injuries. J.K. Scott, of course, a punter. I think that they keep him. He did really, really good and limited like 58 total yards for punt return. That is incredible. You also have Jalen Guyton. That's your speed guy. maybe you don't need him depending on the draft, which we're going to talk about second. Trey Pipkins, who took a massive step up at the right tackle spot. You have Drew Tranquill, who took a huge step up at that linebacker spot. Both those guys won awards in my Chargers end of season awards ceremony, so you should check that out. I would highly recommend it. A little bit longer of a video, but I still think nonetheless it's worth it. Dicker the kicker, who also won an award. I don't see a reason why you don't keep him on this team. Brendan Fehoko, Donald Parham, Easton Stick, as well as Chase Daniels. I think it's finally time to decide if you're keeping. I think it's time to decide who is your second guy. I don't think you need to keep all three quarterbacks. Now, though that can be risky, I think it's just you can fill a more important role with that extra spot if you only do two quarterbacks there. And you're likely, once again, looking to re-sign Justin Herbert here in this offseason. And that's not the whole list. As mentioned, there's still plenty of other pieces that are really, really important, long-term wise, as well as like practice squad. But some of these pieces outside of this list can get moved on without a whole lot of shaking up on this team. Now, the Chargers currently have $10 million prior to the cap shifts, which will occur this offseason, and prior to the cuts. So $10 million is not a whole lot, and likely, could only get you about like 5 or so of these guys on like the more important list, and then of course your remaining guys, and doesn't leave you in a great spot to get a big time free agent signing like we saw last year. But there will be some cuts, and I will cover that in a separate video because I just need to look into it a little bit more. But there's definitely some players that will get cut and stack onto this cap space, as well as the cap space moving. Maybe the Chargers are able to keep a little bit more on this list than I first expected. But this is your free agency inner pool for this Chargers team. A lot going on here. I'll quickly cover these guys. Kyle Van Noy and Bryce Callahan, I think, are two pieces that you should definitely keep. I think they're very, very important. Kyle Van Noy was a huge piece when Joey Bosa was out, and I think he still did really good when Bosa returned. Bryce Callahan was incredible, and with J.C. Jackson kind of still lingering, will he return to what he was? How bad will this injury be? I think Bryce is really, really important. Morgan Fox was a big-time pickup. I could see you keeping him. You don't have to, though. Nas Adderley, I'm kind of leaning towards them letting Nas go. I think they'll either try to draft somebody or hope JT Woods fills in that need. DeAndre Carter, a little bit questionable there. I think that leans on the draft if you think you can get your guy. And, of course, free agency is before the draft. But I think, Carter and also Jalen Guyton are kind of guys that are going to hang in the balance. How do the Chargers feel about the draft? Can you get a speed guy that can also return? Then you could technically remove both those guys and pick up, a free agency piece or something like that for, if you think you need a little bit more versatile of a piece. Or you keep one of these guys. Maybe you keep both of these guys if you don't think you're going to get a guy in the draft, or you don't plan on getting a guy in the draft, which I really hope that they do. I could see Carter or Guyton getting moved on. J.K. Scott, I think they're definitely going to keep. Pipkins, I really think they need to keep. I don't know how they're feeling. Draft could alter that, but I think he definitely deserved it and was an incredibly, incredibly improved. Drew Tranquill, you got to keep Drew. You have to keep Drew. We just saw last year Kaiser White moved on. Uchenna Nwosu moved on. Two incredible linebackers that were for this team 2 years ago. Both left and had a really solid year and improved since then. I think you got to keep Drew and make sure that he doesn't end up doing the similar thing there. Dicker the kicker, I think you keep. Fehoko, I think you can get for a pretty cheap price and worth keeping. Parham is really up in the air. He's missed so much time that letting him go I'm perfectly fine with that. But for his size, for what he can bring to this team when healthy, I think he's a really, really good piece. And if you can get him healthy and get him on a cheap deal, I think that he's worth keeping. But maybe there's another option in the draft. Like I said, Stick and Daniels, I think you only keep one of them this year, and then I really hope they sign Herbert. That's just a quick little synopsis on the internal free agents. Next up, I want to talk draft. I'm not going to touch on external free agents quite yet. I think that's best done in a long form video strictly about that. But also, I just don't know enough quite yet. I don't know how much money he's going to be sitting. I think that's a whole different subject to talk. I do want to talk draft real quick. Now, of course, first round, all of us Chargers fans are leaning towards, hey, let's get a speed wide receiver. And although I love that, there are definitely some other options here, and I do want to bring that to your attention. Now, offensively, a speed wide receiver would be great, but I think an elite level tight end could be a good pick. I think Gerald Everett kind of getting close to that, top 10 tight end in the league. I think if he, he's improved every year that he's been in the league. If he can improve next year, I think he might be able to jump in that top 10, if I'm being honest. But I think taking an elite tight end in the draft could work out very, very well. Now, you don't have to. Of course, Antonio Gates is, was a not even drafted. So you can get elite level tight ends, GOAT level tight ends in Antonio Gates, but that's not super likely. So maybe you go get a guy in the first round. I'm kind of okay with that, especially if the speed wide receiver isn't already there for you with a later pick in the draft. Maybe, offensively, maybe you also go get a, lineman. We've seen that time and time again. The past 2 years have been linemen, and it's turned out really, really well for this team. Maybe you do it again. Maybe you think, hey, Pipkins took a huge jump, but you're not so confident because of his injuries. Maybe you take a right tackle. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think Pipkins earned a spot. But, there's some other options there. Defensively, I don't think you need to take an edge. I also, I'm okay with the interior defensive line. I was a huge fan of Jordan Davis last year. I think under the right circumstances, you could take an interior defensive lineman and pair him up with Sebastian Joseph Day. I think that could be really, really good. I don't think you need to take a cornerback in the first round. You maybe could take a safety across from Derwin, but I think defensively, my favorite thing, other than interior defensive line, would be a linebacker. I'm a huge fan of Drew Tranquill. I'm also a big-time fan of Kenneth Murray. But if you can get a top line linebacker and all your other needs are either picked up in free agency, you think you can get a pretty solid close to level later in the draft, or they're just not any good options in that spot, I do think linebacker could be a really good spot for this team. Now, through the remainder of the draft, I definitely think you got to at least pick up someone on the line. I think drafting a young center to go behind Corey Linsley and learn could be a really good option with, Linsley getting older, and he's such an elite center. Learning under him could be an incredible job. I think getting a young center could be a great opportunity. I think taking a risk on, a guard or a tackle, probably a right tackle behind Trey Pipkins would be really good because I don't think Storm's cutting it. So I think a center as well as a swing tackle, because I think Sawyer potentially takes Matt Filer's spot. I think a swing tackle as well as a center could be good pickups through the remainder of the draft. Definitely not first round. Go out and get another wide receiver. The Chargers have been great at getting top level wide receivers for their team, at least in the third round. Maybe try it again. Keenan Allen was a third rounder. Joshua Palmer definitely starting to pick it up. Maybe keeps doing this and becomes a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 even. Maybe you take another risk on a wide receiver in the third round and it turns out again. That would be great. You could definitely take a wide receiver, whether that's speed if you didn't take him in the first round or just a more all-around versatile, can we build on his potential guy later in the draft could be a good option. And a tight end. I think you have to take a tight end if you don't get one in free agency. I think you have to take one in the draft. Get a young guy in here. I will say, I do really like Stone Smart. We didn't see a whole lot from last year. He is a rookie, but I was pleading for him to get on this team during this whole draft process last year. I think he has a lot of potential, but there are definitely some other options. Maybe you pick up another tight end later in the draft. But I think that's about it offensively. You don't need a running back, I don't think. You just took Isaiah Spiller. I like what Kelly was producing and Austin Eckler, unless you're getting a big bruising back. I would be very happy with a big-time bruising back, but I just don't think they're going to do that. They have 3 guys that they're very confident in. I think Xander Horvath can, if you give him a little bit more opportunity, could be a bruising back for you. I don't really see them taking a running back unless it's like late. I think go get a wide receiver, go get a center, and also a swing tackle. I think that's about it offensively and a tight end. So about 5, there's 5 picks right there. I don't know how many picks the Chargers have currently. 23. They have 7. Ooh. That is not as many as we've seen in recent years. So there's 5 potential options there. Now, of course, free agency might fill a couple of those needs. You might not need them. Now, defensively, once again, I think an interior D-line is a likely option there. And I think a linebacker is also a likely option. and maybe an edge. I think Kyle Van Noy did good, but you haven't quite seen enough from Chris Rumpf. Maybe you take a little bit of a risk on an edge guy in like third round or something like that. Potential option there. I don't think you need a cornerback, and maybe a safety. So defensively, there's 2 for sure, maybe 4 if the right guy falls to you. Offensively, like I said, 5, and I don't think you need all those guys. Who would I lean towards more to improve? I really like what this defense was starting to look like at the end of the year. If you get them healthy, I think that this team's really, really good. I think the offense, supporting this offense, not only depth-wise, but also like weapons, would be more worthwhile in this current moment than your defense. I mean, you get a speed wide receiver, you get a top-level tight end, and you got to go get someone that can, swing tackle or a center at least. There's 3 picks on the offense. Bring in that 4th pick for your swing tackle. There's 4 picks. You got 3 left, and you work with that however you want to work with. Do you want another wide receiver because you were a little bit light this past year, or do you want to go 3 on defense, probably interior D-line, linebacker, and I think your last guy would probably be safety if you move on from Nas. There's some potential pings right there. Now, of course, I'll have a longer video, not only a mock draft, some top options in each round, but also like players to look out for that could be hidden gems. I'll have all those videos. I love draft season. Now, of course, I'd rather be playing, watching playoffs, but I do really, really enjoy the draft. But, that's about all that I can really talk about in the offseason, because the rest is going to be training camps. A lot to look forward to for us Chargers fans. What do you guys think? I am so excited for all of this. What do you guys think? What are you most excited for in this offseason? And who do you want to see come back in internal free agency? Who would you love to see this Chargers team sign in free agency, external? And who is your top pick in the draft? In the first round, who would you like to see the Chargers pick? Comment all of that down below. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And as always, I hope it taught something today. I hope it made you smile, hope it made you laugh. It's really important to me. Affects most day in a great way. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.